Yo, 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 what's good, gang? Appreciate everybody joining me today. Welcome to the CJ Curry Show. We're going to keep today's show pretty short and sweet. I mean, let's be honest. It's a Thursday night football game between the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I don't know that I'm all that excited about it. Are you? Let me know in the chat. Are you feeling this game tonight? Because compared to the previous Thursday night football games, this one's looking like a bit of a downgrade, we'll call it. But I appreciate all of you guys showing up. We're going to take a look at some player props, some popular props across the industry over on PrizePicks. We'll do a little bit of player prop research together. We'll dig into the stats and see why people might be liking these props or why not. You know, why are they taking the more or the less on PrizePicks? Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure that you run those likes up, as many likes as possible. I appreciate you ahead of time. Thanks for all the support, and thanks for taking out some time to be here. Shout out to the chat. I see a few folks already in here leaving some kind words, leaving some messages here. We got Rypo in the building. He says, good morning, gang. Today is going to be epic for us. I've already posted a few plays to Patreon today. Shout out to the Patreon gang. Those of you who are Patreon members, I appreciate your ongoing support. It's just $20 a month. You can support the channel. You can get access to the community. We've got a whole Discord community full of people doing research, sharing their findings, their information, trying to help each other win, man. That's what it's all about. $20 a month. Link down in the description below if you want to join Patreon. But I've already posted some MLB picks to Patreon, and so I'll be, digging into some NFL stuff and probably post a little bit of that just a little bit later. So Mike is in the building. He says, let's go. Shout out, Mike. Appreciate you being here. Jose's in the building. Let's go, baby. Another good week ahead of us. Love the positive energy. Love the attitude that you're bringing, Jose. Everyday fantasy. Joey Jones says, what they do, gang. Let's get it. He's got the money bag emojis going, so he's ready to win some money. I like that. Not Migs, ready for tonight's game. Bless. You flex. I flex back. I see you, Migs. Appreciate you for being here. Wiggy says, not at all going to be a boring game. A little tongue-in-cheek there, a little wink. Yeah, that's the type of game we're going to have tonight. Kind of a slow pace, probably low-scoring game with some potential weather issues. Sounds like we're going to have some weather issues ahead of us in tonight's game. So that's why you saw Nick Chubb and Naji Harris as the featured players on today's thumbnail for this live stream show. I think it's going to be one of those games where the running backs are very, very much involved, but we'll get into that in just a minute. Jodinho's in the building. He says, bro, this new visual is fire. Appreciate you, Jodinho. One of my guys created that. Shout out to my man Prince, who's keeping it looking crispy in the graphic design game on my live streaming channel. Yeah, we did a little bit of overhaul during the summer. New look, different vibe, different color scheme. Went with the black and gold. Not that I'm a Steelers fan or anything, but, PrizePicks. Got to keep it PrizePicks. T-Bone says, what's up, boss? Too many watching and not enough smashing the like button. I appreciate you, T-Bone. Keep the people honest, man. Call them out. Say, hey, if you're watching, jump in the chat. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. Turn on notifications. I'm going to be going live a lot this NBA season. Things will shift over to basketball here real soon. All right. Jodinho says, join the Patreon ASAP. Appreciate the shout out, my friend. Jigga Man says, let's go. We got official M23 dog saying top of the morning. Appreciate that. Lee Van Pierre. What's up? Divine Truth Allah's in the building. Peace back at you, brother. New day, new money. Let's go. Let's freaking get it. Tony Ruiz is here. All day props and win some money. That's right. We got baseball cooking up. We'll have some NFL here tonight, so got a nice little slate of things to, put some money down on. So appreciate everybody showing up, man. I'm glad I could be with you guys and rock with you and that you're rocking with me. Let's get down to business. We're going to play some Weddle real quick in case you're never here or you've maybe just viewing this for the first time. Weddle NFL guessing game. You guys are going to help me out. We're going to figure out who the mystery player is today in the NFL. So let's switch scenes. Boom. Look at that little movie magic here. And yeah, it's based on the game Wordle. It's called Weddle after Eric Weddle, former NFL player, safety, I believe he was. So we could start with any player that we want. I'm going to start with one of tonight's players, who's probably going to be a popular player in the world of daily fantasy, sports betting, and we're talking about Nick Chubb. Now, obviously, we did not get the correct guess on our first guess. It's really hard to do that. Nick Chubb, though, definitely not the mystery player, and it's not a player from the Cleveland Browns. So we know it's not Nick Chubb, it's not a Cleveland Brown, and it's not a running back, but this player does, however, play in the AFC, but not the AFC North. So we got three other AFC divisions that we could potentially look at. Maybe it's a quarterback, wide receiver, or tight end, but it's definitely not a running back. Now, I'm going to say that it could be a wide receiver, maybe a quarterback, because the only reason I say that, this player is shorter than 5'11". Shorter than 5'11", but is exactly 26 years old. Jersey number is going to be one that's below 24. So we know a lot of those wide receivers, they have those single digit or double digit numbers below 20, right? Quarterbacks also fit that bill. Typically a single digit or double digit number for a quarterback. And this player is going to be a fairly young player, maybe a guy in his first, couple of years, few years in the league. So AFC player, not a running back, fairly young, fairly short. That's what we have to work on right here, or work with, I should say. Chris Taylor saying, what about Deontay Johnson? All right, we could go to the other side of this game. Oh, no. Before I hit enter on Deontay Johnson, I must remind you, this player is not in the AFC North. So it cannot be a Pittsburgh Steeler. Let's back this thing up. We know it's not a Pittsburgh Steeler because Pittsburgh's in the AFC North, right? So who else could it be? Not Deontay Johnson, Chris. Had to pump the brakes on that one. Had to hold up on that one. Brendan wants to know, do I play fantasy football? Of course I play fantasy football. I've actually been playing fantasy football since I was 13. Yeah, I'm old. Everyday Fantasy says Chase. Jamar Chase. I think we had Jamar Chase the other day. Unless you're talking about Chase Edmonds, but he's a running back. We know this player cannot be a running back. Look, I'm going to just throw something out there. This player's short, right? It's got to be a shorter player. Devin Singletary, Devin Singletary is a running back. See, there we go again. We got to pay attention to the rules here, people. We know this is not a running back. We know that this player is not in the AFC North. All right? Not a running back. No more running back guesses from you guys. It's got to be a wide receiver, possibly a short quarterback, but I'm thinking maybe it's a wideout here. Gabe Davis? Gabriel Davis. Well, look, we can go from there. Maybe we'll unlock some more clues. All right. So we know now that this player is, in fact, a wide receiver, is not in the AFC East or the AFC North. And Gabe Davis, I figured, was a little bit too tall. So now we're looking for somebody that's definitely shorter than 5'11", playing the wide receiver position. Jersey number is 13, though. Some of you guys are saying Elijah Moore of the New York Jets. Some of you say Brandon Cooks. I kind of like Brandon Cooks, man. I know he's number 13, right? Give me some Cooks. Let's try Brandon Cooks. Oh, so close. So close, gang. Brandon Cooks, not the guy. This player's not in the Houston Texans and not in the AFC South. He is a wide receiver. He is exactly 5'10". Brandon Cooks, a little bit too old at 28 years old, but the jersey number, on point. Definitely on point with that number 13. We're almost there, gang. We've already got 3 guesses on the board. We're hitting some greens, though. More and more greens. I got Matt Huber saying it's KJ Hamler of the Denver Broncos. I've got official M23 dog thinking maybe this is Trendon Holiday. Going back up a little further, we've got Kevon Meyer-Berg saying Moore. We got Jose Martinez saying Elijah Moore. Let's give Elijah Moore a guess. Listen, I can't tell you what Elijah Moore's jersey number is, but I can tell you that it's not Elijah Moore. AFC East. Damn it. Well, we wasted a guess on that one. It's not Elijah Moore, gang. DeAndre Carter? Perhaps. I mean, we know we're looking in the AFC West, right? AFC West. But yes, Elijah Moore, not in the West. He's in the East. AFC West. So who are we looking at in the AFC West? We got, Kansas City, right? Who else out there? The Raiders, the Chargers, and help me with the last one. Who's the last one? I'm drawing a blank. Oh, the Rams. No, not the Rams. That's the NFC. Help me out here. Who am I missing? Kansas City, the Chargers, the Raiders, and why am I blanking out? Y'all help me out. Who's that fourth team in the AFC West? Hunter Renfrow? We thinking Renfrow? Renfrow, bro? I think you might be right. If I'm not mistaken, Hunter Renfrow is 13. And the Broncos. There we go, the Broncos. Bang. Bang, bang. Hunter Renfrow. Who's the first one that shouted out Hunter Renfrow? Was it my man Wiggy? Wiggy came through with the Hunter Renfrow guess? Yes, it is Hunter Renfrow. My man fumbled, twice in the last game? Kind of cost the Raiders the game. I think he suffered a little bit of a head trauma there, too. I think he busted his noggin, Hunter Renfrow. But yeah, Cardinals, historic comeback versus the Raiders in that game last week. Hunter Renfrow is the correct guess. Las Vegas Raiders, AFC West. He is a wide receiver. He is a short wide receiver at 5'10". He's exactly 26 years old, and he rocks number 13. Yeah, Renfrow got popped, got that bell rung, ended up coughing up the football, and possibly costing his team the win. As a Chiefs fan, Wiggy was loving seeing Hunter Renfrow get clocked. All right, gang, listen, appreciate everybody being here. If you haven't slapped that like button yet, do so now. If you're not subscribed yet, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button. Make sure the notifications are turned on so you don't miss anything when I go live. We got the Browns and Steelers. Let's take a look at the game tonight. First, let's start by taking a look at the total and the spread from this game because we've had some line movement since this line went live. So, what do I mean by that? Well, they had the Pittsburgh Steelers implied to score 19 points when this line went up. That has dropped down to 17. All right, so they don't expect quite as many points to be scored from the Pittsburgh Steelers side. That's a difference of 2 points less for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then on the other side there, Cleveland, 21.5 points is what they opened at. They have now dropped down to 21. 21. Shout out to 21 Savage. So now we're looking at a difference of 2.5 points, right? 2.5 points. 2.5 is actually what the Cleveland Browns opened up as. That was the spread. The live spread, though, is 4, meaning there's a bigger gap here. They think Cleveland's going to be a bigger favorite to win this game than when the game originally opened. And then you can see, as I mentioned, 2.5 point difference. The total opened up at 40.5. It's down to 38.5. So this game is trending downward. Not as many points and looking like a little bit more of a spread here, a little bit more of a gap between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. It's going to be an ugly game, guys. Make sure you have a good snack. Maybe a cold beverage next to you to help you get through it, all right? Taking a look at the game information here, starting lineups. Not so much important when it comes to NFL betting or daily fantasy for NFL, but we're going to look at it anyways. Game kicks off at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, it's going to be in Cleveland at First Energy Stadium. So Pittsburgh, the road team, Cleveland, the home team. And as we move down here, you can kind of get a look at the weather. It's going to be 61 degrees, mostly cloudy, and we got 20-mile-per-hour winds here. Very windy game. Listen, 5 to 10 miles per hour, no big deal. But you're talking 20 miles per hour here. That's going to impact some of those long throws. Some of those downfield throws may not be on point. Now, if you take a look at both of the quarterbacks on each side here, Mitch Trubisky, not a great downfield passer. So we're not really worried about that. I don't expect very many deep balls to be thrown here. There wasn't going to be very many deep balls thrown to begin with when you look at the caliber of quarterback on both sides here. Trubisky and Jacoby Brissett for Cleveland, right? You do have 2 very good running backs on both sides, though. Naji Harris for Pittsburgh, Nick Chubb for the Cleveland Browns. You also got Kareem Hunt, who's going to be in the mix. We'll talk about some Kareem Hunt props as well. Taking a look at some of the other guys here. Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Pickens. Those are your Pittsburgh starting 3 receivers. On the other side, you got Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and Bell. Those are your top receivers. And then the tight ends, you got Freiermuth for Pittsburgh, one of Trubisky's early favorite targets, it seems. Maybe the best receiver on Pittsburgh through 2 weeks. And then David Njoku on the other side for the Cleveland Browns. So, notable injuries, obviously TJ Watt is going to be out for Pittsburgh. I think that's really going to help things for these Cleveland Brown running backs, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. No TJ Watt in the middle there. Seems like a great opportunity. A lot of wind, Pretty good offensive line for Cleveland. No TJ Watt on the other side for Pittsburgh. Seems like a good opportunity for these Cleveland running backs to eat, to thrive, right? So that's what I'm kind of thinking, how things play out. So let's get into it. I've went around the industry. I've gathered some picks that people seem to be on tonight. We're going to take a look at those together. You guys are going to let me know in the chat, are you rocking with these picks or not, as we do the research together, as we dig through the numbers together. So let's get down to business. We'll start things off with the Cleveland Browns, and I mentioned their running backs. One of the popular picks that I've seen going around today is Mr. Kareem Hunt for his receiving yards at 15.5. I saw some folks liking the over on Kareem Hunt at 15.5 receiving yards, which is where we're going to get him here on PrizePicks. So you could see Kareem Hunt here at 15.5. Week 1, he covered this prop with 24 receiving yards against the Carolina Panthers. Week 2, he covered this prop with 16 receiving yards. So back-to-back weeks, 2 weeks in a row, we've seen Kareem Hunt cover the 15.5 projected receiving yards on PrizePicks. So PrizePicks keeping things pretty mild here with Kareem Hunt at 15.5. Let's go ahead and take a look at this together. We've got 2 weeks worth of data here. Listen, this is ProFootballReference.com, totally free site for you guys to take advantage of, for you guys to look at. Let's go into a split screen view here. There we go. And we'll go to the running back position on ProFootballReference.com. And then what we can do is go to toggle per game stats. We'll go to the receiving section, click on the receiving yards, and then that will help you get an idea how many receiving yards per game that the Pittsburgh Steelers have allowed to opposing running backs, such as Kareem Hunt and the aforementioned Nick Chubb. Now, you take a look, 2 weeks worth of data here. Pittsburgh giving up the 5th most receiving yards to opposing tailbacks at 58 receiving yards per game. So Kareem Hunt at 15.5, I'm not mad at that. That's actually looking pretty good. We know out of the 2 running backs for Cleveland, Kareem Hunt more involved in the passing game than Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb's kind of more of the first and second down back. Kareem Hunt's going to be that guy that comes in for those obvious passing down situations most of the time, right? Those third down situations, Kareem Hunt will be that guy. And we know that the weather's going to be bad. So it could be check down city, right? Jacoby Brissett to Chubb, Jacoby Brissett to Kareem Hunt, maybe to Njoku. That ADOT that they talk about, average depth of target, probably going to be pretty low tonight. I don't see these teams throwing the ball deep, especially when you got Brissett and you got Trubisky on the other side. So I could see the running backs being involved, the tight ends being involved, and I could see those wide receivers catching a lot of shorter to intermediate type of passes tonight from these 2 quarterbacks, with the weather being what it is, 20-mile-per-hour winds if you just got here. But anyway, through 2 weeks, Pittsburgh giving up nearly 60 yards receiving to opposing running backs. So I think things are looking pretty good for Kareem Hunt at 15.5. He's covered in 2 weeks, 24 and 16 yards. So yeah, I'm not mad at that. Now let's take a look here. I get you a projection, and of course I'm using Fantasy Labs today. There's 2 really sharp minds behind these projections. One is Sean Kerner. Sean Kerner, one of the most accurate when it comes to ranking players in fantasy football. He's fantastic. And we got Chris Raybon, another guy, very, very sharp when it comes to NFL stuff. So what we've done is we've taken both of their projection models, we've combined them, aggregated their projections to come up with a consensus projection for these particular props. So let's take a look at the receiving yards. And we could simply just punch in Kareem Hunt's name, and you can see that he's got a projection of 15.9, which is really close to 16, and then the mean is 18 receiving yards. So things are looking pretty good here for Kareem Hunt. Now, one thing that a lot of people like to do across the industry is they like to compare PrizePicks lines to various sports books, something that I've been doing all along. For those who have been rocking with me for a while, you know this has been a sound strategy. We've kind of compared PrizePicks to other sports books, other sites since the very beginning here. All right. So you can see that most sites have Kareem Hunt's receiving yard prop at 15.5, right? And you're seeing some action, some juice on the over at 15.5 on some of these sites. Now, a couple of the sites, DraftKings, BetMGM, they've got Kareem Hunt at 17.5 receiving yards. 17.5 receiving yards, 2 yards higher than where he's at on PrizePicks. So we are getting a little bit of value here, right? 2 yards, not a ton, with a prop like yardage There's a lot of possible outcomes. The range of outcomes is pretty wide. There's a lot of variance when it comes to yardage props, whether that be passing yards, whether that be receiving yards, whether that be rushing yards, right? There's a lot of different outcomes when it comes to yardage props. So yeah, there's a little bit of value here at 17.5 on the books versus the 15.5 on PrizePicks, but don't go getting too excited. It's not like getting too reception value, in other words, because of the outcome being so wide. Anyways, what do you guys think about Kareem Hunt here? 15.5 receiving yards. We kind of know what to expect when it comes to the game script, right? Potentially bad weather. Probably a lot of checkdowns. Probably a lot of short to intermediate routes run and passes thrown. Kareem Hunt 2 for 2 covering this prop. Pretty solid projection for him. Are we liking Hunt over 15.5? Do we think maybe he falls short tonight against Pittsburgh? You guys let me know in the chat. Thumbs up if you're liking it. Thumbs down if you're fading it or just taking the under. You could always take the under too. You know, it's more fun to go for more, but sometimes going less is the move, and we'll talk about going less in just a minute. So we talked about Kareem Hunt and his receiving yards. What other Cleveland Brown picks look decent, look worthwhile tonight? Well, there's a couple. We mentioned the running backs for Cleveland, probably going to be heavily involved, right? So that would mean Nick Chubb, the other running back. We got his rushing yards here at 82.5 rushing yards. Cleveland's got a solid offensive line. Pittsburgh's going to be without TJ Watt. The wind's going to be kicking up pretty heavily. So a guy like Nick Chubb and his rushing yards, potentially a good play. We saw him back on Tuesday. He was voted in as a taco. For those of you who don't play on PrizePicks, every Tuesday they have a tradition on PrizePicks called Taco Tuesday, where you get a discount on a player prop. Most of the time it's multiple. 2 to 3 tacos are served, usually on Taco Tuesday. So you guys voted Nick Chubb to be that taco on Taco Tuesday, one of the 3 tacos back on Tuesday. So if you got the discount on the Nick Chubb rushing yards, congratulations to you. Not a bad look. Now, another way that you could go with Nick Chubb, if you're not feeling the yards, you could also look at his rushing attempts. Maybe he carries the ball a lot, but maybe he doesn't get the aforementioned yards necessary for the more on this prop. Let's take a look at both of them, right? These could both be pretty worthwhile ways to go when it comes to playing Nick Chubb tonight. Let's go back to Pro Football Reference. Let's look at the Pittsburgh Steelers and see how many rushing yards per game they've given up to opposing running backs through the first 2 weeks. Over 100 rushing yards per game, 102 to be exact. That's rushing yards given up to opposing running backs. If you see that, you can see it's ranked inside the top 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th most. That's the 8th most rushing yards per game in the last 2 weeks, or first 2 weeks, however you want to look at it. Either way, their run defense isn't really all that great. Now, you got some teams out there giving up 140 yards per game, like Houston and Green Bay. So over 100, one of only like 11 teams giving up 100 or more yards through the first 2 weeks. So Nick Chubb's rushing yards, not looking like a bad way to go here. Now, Nick Chubb, 82.5 rushing yards, right? Had 141 on the ground versus Carolina in week 1. Huge week 1 for Nick Chubb. Comes back against New York with 87 rushing yards. So he's gotten it done against both Carolina and New York. Now, Carolina's giving up the 4th most rushing yards per game. So he got it done against them. And we take a look at the New York Jets. They're giving up about 93.5 rushing yards per game. So you can kind of see where the teams that Nick Chubb had success against, where they kind of compare versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he's in a pretty good spot against Pittsburgh, given the game script, given the way things are expected to play out tonight. I'm not mad at Nicholas Chubb. I don't even know if his first name's really Nicholas. I just went there, though. Anyways, on top of that, so we talked about the rushing yards. I think those look pretty good just based on what Pittsburgh has been giving up over the first 2 games. Let's go look at the rushing attempts. Rushing attempts for Nick Chubb. He's at 16 right now. 16 rushing attempts. Now, we don't have game logs to look at here, but our friends over at props.cash have us covered. Shout out to props.cash. If you're not using it yet, I can get you 25% off your first month. There's a promo link and a code down in the description of today's video. Take advantage of it. We've got NFL going right now. MLB is still underway, and NBA is right around the corner. And by far, NBA is the best sport when it comes to using props.cash. So definitely check it out. If you're not using props.cash yet, you should be. You really should be. So we're going to pull Nick Chubb up here. Take a look at the first couple of weeks. 141 rushing yards against Carolina on the road. 87 rushing yards against the Jets at home. So you kind of get an idea of what Nick Chubb's been up to. Now we can take a look at his matchups last season against Pittsburgh. Faced him twice. 61 and 58 rushing yards. Did not get the job done in either of the games versus the Pittsburgh Steelers last season. But last season was last season. This is a new season, new situation, right? So let's go and take a look at those rushing attempts. Rushing attempts for Nick Chubb. Week 1, 22 carries against Carolina, which is more than the 16 where he's at on PrizePicks. 17 carries in week 2 versus the New York Jets. So he's actually 2 for 2 in going over 16 rushing attempts. So he's 2 for 2 on rushing attempts. He's also 2 for 2 on the yards. If you guys had to pick between these two, whether it be the rushing yards, whether it be the rushing attempts, which prop are you liking better between the two? Eric Anthony, shout out to you. We back, baby. Yeah, we been back. We been back, bro. Where you been? This is like the fourth or fifth stream that I've done here in the last couple weeks. But yeah, we're back. We're back. Nick Chubb, attempts or rushing yards, gang? Let me know in the chat. Which one are you feeling more? While you guys are deciding, while you're trying to figure out what you should do here, let's go ahead and pull up some rushing yard projections for Nick Chubb. I got him projected for 85 rushing yards. That's more than 82.5. Looking at the different sports books out there, we're seeing a range here on Nick Chubb, a range of anywhere from 80.5 rushing yards, which is less than where PrizePicks has him. We're seeing him as high as 84.5 on some sites, though. So a range of 80.5 to 84.5 on Nick Chubb. So PrizePicks has split the difference. They went right down the middle on his rushing yards, putting him up at a nice little 82.5, not a soft number, not a hard number, just a middle road number. But yes, his projections, they have him at 85, which is more than 82.5. So there's one option for you. Let me see if I have rushing attempts on here. Boom, I do, folks. I've got him projected for 17 rushing attempts. His number on PrizePicks is 16 rushing attempts. Now across the industry, he's at 15.5 or 16.5, depending on the sports book that you're referencing. 15.5, betting favored to go over. 16.5, people are saying, pump the brakes, hold up. We're not comfortable with him going for 17 rushing attempts. We think 16 is probably the right number based on what we're seeing here on these different sports books. 15.5 to 16.5, betting favored to go over at 15.5, but a betting favored to go under at 16.5. So 16 is that magic number, right? Projected for 17. According to the sports book, 16 might be the number. So you might end up in a tie or a push here. It looks like Q6 is liking the attempts. Everyday Fantasy liking the attempts a little bit more. Not Migs thinking maybe the attempts are a little bit too high. Ripo's liking the attempts. We got Wiggy liking the attempts more. So it sounds like the consensus based on the chat here, most of you folks are liking the attempts more than the yards on Nick Chubb. Let me throw one more out there at you. Right? Another Nick Chubb prop. What do we think about his rushing touchdowns? Just to let you know, according to The Blitz by Derek Carty, another fantastic NFL projection model and system, they've got Nick Chubb projected for 0.55 rushing touchdowns tonight. 0.55 rushing touchdowns, slightly more than the 0.5 he's at right now, right? He had 0 rushing touchdowns against Carolina in week 1. He comes back with 3 against the New York Jets. Do we think maybe he finds pay dirt tonight against the Pittsburgh Steelers without TJ Watt? I mean, if they get down there in the red zone inside the 5-yard line, it's going to Nick Chubb more often than not. Let's take a look at Nick Chubb's touchdown numbers versus the Pittsburgh Steelers over the last season. 0. In both games, 0. Goose egg, nothing, zilch, none, nada. No touchdowns against Pittsburgh last season. We could go back to the previous season, though, and my man found the end zone not once, but twice. 1 touchdown in each game versus Pittsburgh. So 2 seasons ago, finds the end zone in each game. Last season, doesn't find the end zone in either game. All right? So you can kind of see why they've got his projected rushing touchdowns at 0.5. Not Miggs is saying his rushing touchdown has the highest percentage. Todd, Live for Sunday, says, I like Nick Chubb's rushing touchdowns. I don't mind them either, but do you like them more than the other ones that we looked at? The rushing attempts or the rushing yards? 3 different ways that you could play Nick Chubb, though. You could take the more on his rushing touchdowns. You could take the more on his rushing attempts, or you could take the more on the projected rushing yards. So 3 different ways to go. All right. There you go. That's going to pretty much do it for the Cleveland side. One other one that I'll throw at you to kind of have on your radar, maybe Jacoby Brissett for 9.5 rushing yards. I mean, listen, we go back and look at week 1, week 2. You got 10 rushing yards for Brissett against Carolina. So that hit. 43 rushing yards against the New York Jets in week 2. He's at 9.5. So 1 first down scramble. 1 first down scramble for Jacoby Brissett is all he needs to hit the over. Sounds easy, but sometimes the way that the game flows, those quarterbacks don't always rush the football. Let's take a look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, though, and see how many rushing yards per game that they've given up to quarterbacks over week 1 and week 2. So we go down here, we find Pittsburgh. Where they at? Lord. You ever get in one of those situations where your eyes just don't work when you need them to? Yeah, that just happened. But we found them. The Pittsburgh Steelers giving up 26.5 rushing yards per game to opposing quarterbacks through weeks 1 and weeks 2. That puts them top 10, right? Top 10. They're one of only a dozen teams giving up 20 or more rushing yards to opposing QBs through 2 weeks. That's a pretty small sample size, just being 2 games. But, yeah, 26.5. Brissett needs 10. Now they're saying, Q6 is saying that Brissett's line went from 9.5 up to 11. Let's refresh. Things could be on the move here. Let's look. Ooh, Jacoby. No longer at the juicy 9.5. Now he's going to need 12 rushing yards. All right, I'm staying away from it. This is going to be a fade for me. It's a fade for me now. Maybe he still gets it. Listen, I don't want to find out the hard way and lose by the hook or something stupid. So I'm going to just stay away. I don't like playing bumps. You know, it's like going into your favorite store and the item that you saw online at one price has now increased in price. You don't want to go into that store and grab that item anymore and pay a couple bucks more, do you? That's kind of how I feel now. But listen, the bump for Jacoby Brissett from 9.5 up to 11.5 is probably warranted. He's projected for 17 rushing yards. And if you look at the various sports books out there, they've got him at 10.5, at 12.5. So now PrizePicks again, taking the middle number at 11.5. I liked him better at 9.5. We were so close. Day late and $1 short. So I'm going to stay away from Jacoby Brissett at this point. I liked him at 9.5. But again, I don't want to pay a premium. I don't want to pay more now than I would have 5 minutes ago. Not going to play the bump. I'm going to fade this guy. That's my official move. I'm fading it. All right. That's the Cleveland Browns side of things, guys. What about the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? We got Deontay Johnson, Naji Harris, some Pickens, some Freiermuth to take a look at here. One of the props that I saw that was a popular one across the industry was this guy, Deontay Johnson, for more than 55.5 receiving yards. I don't know if I'm loving that, though, given the situation, the weather, and all. He should be heavily targeted by Mitch Trubisky, but it's going to be hard for Pittsburgh or Cleveland to really push the football down the field, right? It's going to be hard for them to push the football down the field in this game. So unless Deontay Johnson's catching like 6 or 7 balls, maybe even 8 catches, right, he's going to have a lot of short yardage receptions to hit the over at 56. Now, he could get some yards after catch. He could take a little short one, get some yards after the catch, and maybe he gets to the over or the more that way. But just looking at his game logs, I mean, it's not all that inspiring, right? He had 55 against Cincinnati, 57 against New England. Maybe Cleveland gets out ahead. Maybe toward the end of the game, Pittsburgh has to abandon the run game and they start going pass heavy toward the end of the game, trying to push the ball downfield, right? Could be. It could be that way. Are we liking Deontay Johnson or anybody from the Pittsburgh receiving game? I see Laszlo in there. He's saying he's liking Naji Harris. Yeah, we're going to talk some Naji Harris. But Deontay Johnson, or anybody else for that matter, are we liking the 55.5? Let's go take a look at the wide receiver position and see how this Cleveland Browns defense has been holding up through 2 games against opposing wide receivers. Well, guys, it's not very good looking. I mean, Cleveland's given up 200 receiving yards per game to opposing wideouts through the first 2 weeks of football. That's the 6th most receiving yards to the wide receiver position. So maybe there's something to that. I don't have a whole lot of faith in Mitch Trubisky. I don't like the weather situation, the scenario in Cleveland tonight. It's a little scary. But if they're going to dink and dunk, if they're going to hit Deontay Johnson with like 10 targets or more tonight, and he's able to haul in 5, 6, 7 of them, then I could see a situation where he's at 56 or more yards. So let's go take a look at a projection for this particular prop. And let's see if Deontay Johnson is projecting well. Maybe he's not. He's at 54.2 receiving yards, right? That's the consensus projection, the Kerner model, the Raybon model. You put the two together, he's at 54.2. The mean is 59. Taking a look at some of the other sports books out there, I kind of look at these sports book numbers as a projection as well. So they have him somewhere from 53.5 receiving yards all the way up to 56.5 receiving yards. So you got a little window, a little range of about 3 yards there to play with, right? 53.5 to 56.5. PrizePicks has him up at 55.5. They got him kind of in the middle, kind of a middle number. Once again, that seems to be the MO for PrizePicks. They kind of like to ride the middle number, right? Not seeing a whole lot of action on this prop. Points bet, a little bit of juice on the over at 55.5. Bet Rivers, a little bit of action on the 55.5 on the over. I mean, a minus 115. But it doesn't seem like a popular play. To be honest with you, the passing game for either side of this equation doesn't seem like a popular play across the industry. You're seeing a lot of people on the running back props more than anything else. So what do we think, chat? Are we liking this Deontay Johnson over 55.5? Do we think it's a worthwhile pick, or are you guys just going to fade it, leave it alone? Maybe Trubisky will have time to throw. That could be a good point. Browns' defensive line is banged up. Appreciate Laszlo for letting us know that. Mark H is saying with Trubisky at quarterback, the only Pittsburgh receiving prop I like is Freiermuth over 4 receptions. You know, I actually do have some Freiermuth on my list. I saw some folks liking Freiermuth at 35.5 receiving yards. Week 1, 75 receiving yards. Week 2, 22. We talked about the weather being bad. We talked about the average depth of target probably being shallow, short, right? They're not going to be pushing the ball downfield a whole lot in this game. Not with winds of 20 miles per hour. So maybe it's a check down type of game for Mitch Trubisky. Maybe he goes to Naji Harris, like Ripo saying. Naji at 3 receptions could be a move, right? Maybe he's checking down to the running backs more. Maybe he's dumping it off to the tight ends in those short to intermediate parts of the field. So let's take a look at the tight end position. We could go see how the Cleveland Browns have done through 2 weeks when it comes to receiving yards allowed to opposing tight ends. So we go down here, we take a look at the Cleveland Browns and where they rank. Again, it's just 2 weeks. It's not a whole lot of data, not a huge sample size, but through 2 weeks, the Cleveland Browns given up about 47 receiving yards per game to opposing tight ends. Puts them right around like top 15 or so. Okay, not a huge number. You know, like Arizona, over 100 yards to opposing tight ends. Of course, they face Travis Kelce 1 week, Darren Waller the next week. Not like the Miami Dolphins, who are giving up 100 yards receiving to opposing tight ends, right? But Cleveland giving up 47, a respectable number. Freiermuth would need 36 if we decide to take more, the more prop. So let's go take a look at Freiermuth while we got the receiving yard projections pulled up. I got him at 34.2, really close to the 35.5. The mean is 38 receiving yards. And we take a look at the range here on Freiermuth on the different sports books. Pretty wide range of outcomes here. He's anywhere from 30.5 up to 35.5, depending on what site you're looking at. I don't see anything below 30.5. So 30.5 is kind of like the floor. 35.5, actually 36.5 is like the ceiling, right? So PrizePicks has them, let's just say, closer to a ceiling type number at 35.5. But this one's a little scary, being that the lines makers on these different books have such a wide range of outcomes, anywhere from 30.5 up to 36.5. That 6-yard gap is a pretty big difference, pretty significant, right? You guys thinking fade Pat Freiermuth? Okay, maybe we walk away from Pat Freiermuth. Let me ask you this: if you had to pick Deontay Johnson's receiving yards more or Pat Freiermuth's receiving yards more, which one do you like more? DJ or Pat? Which one you feeling more out of the two? Let me know, chat. Let me know where your head's at. And while you guys are thinking about that, let's go to another Pittsburgh prop that I've seen a lot of love for, that I've seen getting some attention across the industry today. This guy, another Pittsburgh receiver. We're talking George Pickens and his receptions, not yards, but receptions. Why are we talking about this one? Well, some folks in the industry think that George Pickens will not have 3 receiving receptions today, that he will be held under 3 receptions. And you can see what he's done in week 1 and week 2. 1 reception against Cincinnati, 1 reception against New England. So this could be a good move, taking the under or less on the receptions for Pickens. Let's go pull him up here on Prop.Cash so we could get a more in-depth, detailed view of what George Pickens has done through week 1 and week 2. All right, important to note, Pickens, total of 63 offensive snaps in week 1 against Cincinnati. He was out there for 45 of them, 71% of the snaps in week 1. Pickens was out there for 59 offensive snaps in week 2. He was out there for 50 out of 59, 85%. So we've seen a pretty big jump, 14% jump in the amount of offensive snaps that George Pickens was actually out on the field for. What does that mean? Well, that means more playing time. He saw the field more in week 2 than he did in week 1. Maybe that's a trend. Maybe that's a sign of more to come for George Pickens. Or maybe it's, a game script situation. They needed him out there on the field in passing situations more against New England. Just 2 weeks. So we're not quite sure what to make of that. But I will tell you this. He was targeted 3 times in week 1, 3 times in week 2. Of those 3 targets, caught 1 reception in both games. So despite the uptick in playing time in week 2, he was still only targeted 3 times like he was in week 1. And he turned those 3 targets into just 1 reception. So maybe going George Pickens under or less than 2 receptions is not the worst move in the world. Maybe it's not the worst move in the world. Maybe you could do worse. Let's go to the receiving targets. Do I have a projection for targets? I don't. I don't have a reception for targets, but we can also look at the receptions. His receptions are at 2.5. But at 2.5, looks like a lot of places you're seeing some people betting the over, some people betting the under. So that's his receptions. Oh, we want receptions. Sorry, we're not looking at targets. We're looking at receptions. That's right. Sorry. So at 2.5, projected 2.5 projection, he's at a betting favorite at minus 120 to go under on some sites. Some sites have him projected to go over. What do we think? We taking this prop? We taking less George Pickens for less than 2 receptions? I see Not Miggs is liking Pickens under or less on his fantasy score. Could be an interesting way to go. Going back to my previous question, it looks like you guys are liking Pat Freiermuth more than Deontay Johnson. If you had to choose between the two, I see Latoria says she's liking Pat Freiermuth's receiving yards more than Deontay Johnson. Latroy Timms is liking Freiermuth more than Deontay Johnson. Todd's liking Pat. Q6 says Freiermuth's receptions are the more favorite play than the yards. Okay, that's something worth considering. That's something worth considering, guys. Let's take a look at Pickens real quick for his fantasy score. Guys, if you're using projections to help make fantasy score decisions, make sure you are using DraftKings projections. So my guy Not Miggs is saying George Pickens, 5 fantasy score. He's liking less. The less. So I could pull a projection up for Pickens. Go to the wide receiver position. I've got him projected for 7.1 fantasy score. Now again, that's using DraftKings projections, which is the projection site that is most like PrizePicks. Not exactly, but the closest one. It's closer than FanDuel, I'll tell you that. Oh boy, we got the porn bots up in here. Gotta love that. Gotta love that. Don't click on any of that bull shite, all right? Don't click on any of that bullshit porn stuff. But yeah, I've got Pickens actually projected to go for 7.1 versus the 5, so that might be sketch. Craig, you brought the porn bots with you. Craig, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the porn bots at home next time. Leave those porn bots at home next time. Appreciate you being here, though, Craig. You pervert. No, you're not a pervert. You're a good guy. Craig's a good guy, y'all. Don't listen to me. Craig's not a pervert. He doesn't get down with the porn bots. It's just a coincidence that they showed up when Craig showed up, all right? He's a popular guy. The porn bots like Craig. But he doesn't have to like them back. Naji Harris, 52.5 rushing yards. Let's cap this stream off here. Before one of y'all click on that porn stuff and get yourself caught up with your significant other. You don't want to do that. Trust me, gang. It ain't worth it. It ain't worth the risk. Don't risk it all. Just because they've got the best adult dating site, so they claim. Don't risk it all for that. All right. Naji Harris, 52.5 rushing yards. Seeing this one all over the place for tonight's game. But do we trust this guy? Naji Harris at 52.5 rushing yards. Do we trust him to go for more than 52.5? We look at week 1 and week 2. 23 against Cincinnati, 49 against New England. We know the weather's going to suck. It's going to be bad. I've seen some of you mention Naji Harris receptions. Naji Harris receptions could be a look. You know, check down city in Pittsburgh. Possibly. Trubisky checking down to Naji. I'm not mad at that. That's not a bad idea. 52.5 rushing yards, though. Do we think Naji Harris gets there? I mean, this is going to be a tough one for me. to buy high on, to buy the more on. Let's go look at the Cleveland Browns and their defense. Someone mentioned that the Cleveland Browns defensive line is beat up. Okay, something worth considering. If Cleveland's defense is beat up or their defensive line is not 100% healthy, then maybe Naji Harris and the Pittsburgh Steelers can take advantage. But when I go and look at the Cleveland Browns and how many rushing yards they've given up in weeks 1 and weeks 2, it's only 57. 57 rushing yards per game to opposing running backs. That is the 5th fewest through the first 2 weeks of the season. That does not give me a whole lot of confidence and faith in Naji Harris. Desmond, shout out to you. Thanks for being here, bro. Jeremy's in the building. Says thanks to King Curry. But yeah, Naji Harris not off to a great start here. 23 yards against Cincinnati, 49 against New England, and he's facing a defense tonight that's given up just 57 rushing yards per game to opposing running backs through weeks 1 and weeks 2. So yeah, why should we feel confident that Naji Harris will get there on those rushing yards? Let's take a look at a projection. Again, we're going to be using Kerner and Raybon models here on Fantasy Labs. Punch in Naji. Got him projected for 60 rushing yards. That's 7.5 more than where he's at on PrizePicks at 52.5. We take a look at where he's at across the industry. He's at anywhere from 54.5 up to 55.5. Not a very big range there. Pretty dialed in at 54.5 to 55.5. We are getting a few yards, couple yards of value here on PrizePicks, being that he's at 52.5. Are we ready to buy high? Are we ready to get in on Naji Harris at just 52.5? Do we think he gets it done tonight, gang? Let me know in the chat. Are you vibing with Naji Harris going for 53 or more rushing yards? Let's take a look at last season. Previous matchups for Naji versus Cleveland. We could take a look at that. Maybe that'll help us make our decision, right? Props.cash has us covered. 2 games against Cleveland last season, gang. 91 rushing yards at Cleveland. 188 in the rematch. He seems to run the ball pretty well against the Cleveland Browns. It is last season. Last season is last season, but it's something to look at, something to consider, right? Naji Harris, 91 and 188, 2 games versus Cleveland last year. Craig wants to know, have we talked about Amari Cooper or Chase Claypool? No. We have not really talked too much about the passing attack for either team outside of maybe the running backs and tight ends. We talked a little bit about Deontay Johnson at 55.5. I saw somebody out there in the player prop space. They liked Deontay Johnson going for 56 or more receiving yards, but I don't know if I'm feeling that one. Todd says he's liking Naji Harris receiving yards at 17.5. We go take a quick peek at that one. We got Naji Harris at 17.5 receiving yards. My guy Todd saying he's liking the more. He thinks Naji Harris receives the football for more than 18 or more receiving yards. He had 3 in week 1 versus Cincinnati. Comes back with a strong 40 against New England. So maybe instead of the rushing yards, you go receiving yards for Naji Harris. He's projected for 18.1. The mean is 20 receiving yards. And then out on your favorite sports books, we're seeing a lot of different outcomes here. As low as 15.5. As high as 18.5. PrizePicks has them at 17.5. At 17.5, we're seeing a little bit of action on the under at 17.5. Which way do you guys land on Naji Harris at 17.5 receiving yards? Do you think he goes for more than that? Or do you think he goes for less than that? Let's take a look at the receiving yards allowed per game by the Cleveland Browns. Again, this is just 2 weeks. But through the first 2 weeks, they're kind of sitting middle of the pack, kind of an average defense when it comes to receiving yards allowed to opposing running backs. 32.5 receiving yards per game through weeks 1 and weeks 2. We could take a look at Naji Harris and see what he did against Cleveland in 2 games last season. He covered the receiving yards prop in both games. 29 in the first matchup, comes back with 18 in matchup number 2. So he's 2 for 2 last season against Cleveland, both in the rushing category and in the receiving yards category. Laszlo saying no Jadeveon Clowney for Cleveland, possibly no Myles Garrett. All right. I think I'd rather take the receiving yards on Naji Harris. What say you, though? What about his receptions? We could look at his receptions real quick. That could be another look. He's at 3. He had exactly 3 receptions in both games versus Cleveland. If you want the clean win, if you don't want to potentially tie or push, I'd probably stay away from the receptions and stick to the yardage, maybe the rushing, maybe the receiving. I'm all right says, he's back. Welcome back. Brother, I've been back. Make sure you have notifications turned on. For those of you who are like, man, this guy's back. Listen, I've been back. Turn on notifications. Go down to that subscribe button. Hit subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Right next to that, there's a bell. Hit the bell. Turn on all notifications for my channel. So when I go live, you know when I go live. I don't want you to miss out. I want you to be here, be a part of the conversation. Hit that bell, though, so the notifications turn on. Corey says, just getting in. I saw Jacoby Brissett's passing yards fell from 185 down to 175. Any ideas why? Heavy bets or new info? Corey, I think a lot of it has to do with what they're expecting to be 20-mile-per-hour winds in Cleveland tonight. 20-mile-per-hour winds. A lot of people are taking the under on receiving, passing yards. I think the passing games for both teams are going to take a step back if the winds really are kicking up at 20 miles per hour. Yes, you have to factor in the weather, my friend, Mr. Corey. It's one of those weird things in baseball and football. You got to factor in what will Mother Nature do tonight, right? We don't got to worry about that when we're talking hoops, basketball, right? Not an issue when it comes to b-ball, which is what I like about the NBA. A little bit more predictable of a game than that of the NFL. Because you know, from night to night, the game plan really doesn't change a whole lot in the NBA. You don't have weather factors or anything like that. The guys who are going to get theirs in the National Basketball Association. But anyways, gang, I think that's going to be it. We've pretty much talked about a lot here. Got LaTroy coming through. Do you look at punt props? Not really. How do you feel about Presley Harvin punts? I don't really get into special teams a whole lot, to be honest with you. So no, I'm not a big field goal make or field goal kicker fantasy, but it could be a decent game for punts. I could see something like that happening where you take the over on a punt prop. I could see both teams possibly punting the ball more than they normally would. I'd probably stay away from field goal kickers with 20-mile-per-hour winds. Just a little too volatile for me. Wouldn't go there. Probably wouldn't go there. Kicking field goals. What are my thoughts on Jackson Mahomes? Isn't that Pat Mahomes' brother, like the little TikTok guy? I don't know. I don't have any thoughts. Random question, though. Yeah. Rushing attempts. We talked about Chubb's rushing attempts for sure. Desmond says, should not be a lot of running around for Tannehill. Should be able to sit back and throw the ball. Only has 3 rushing attempts on the year. Yeah. I saw PrizePicks had a pretty low number on Ryan Tannehill. Or Tannehill. Not Tannehill. Are we talking about Tannehill or Trubisky? Now you got me confused. I was talking about Trubisky, my bad. Trubisky's rushing yards. They got a pretty low line at 7.5. Oh, he's talking about Tannehill. Well, Tannehill we'll talk about on another day. But anyways, yeah, I think I'm going to get out of here. Migs, appreciate you. T-Bone, we will see you inside Discord. For all you Patreon members out there, I appreciate all the support. Drop a like on the stream if you haven't yet. Thanks for supporting the show, guys. We will see you again real soon. Peace, peace.